What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you an update to my personal favourite competitive version of Blue Eyes involving Invoked. That's right, I still like this version. I'm not saying it's better than the Primite version, but for my personal playstyle and the fact that I just really like the Invoked cards, this is one of my favourite variants for the Blue Eyes, and I feel that it's probably the most competitive as comparison to the Primites. So, with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe. I'm going to dive headfirst into the profile, show you the updates, talk you through the changes and why they have been made, so you have as much information as possible to help guide you through the upcoming formats leading into Euros, and maybe a little bit after that, once we get Duelist Advanced with the brand new Primite cards as well. May be able to change this build depending on what rate they're going to be. So, diving into the profile, started off with 2 Blue Eyes White Dragon and 1 Jet Dragon. Jet Dragon, as I mentioned pretty much every single time, is completely optional. I know players don't play it, that is absolutely fine. There are scenarios where it can become more of a hindrance than a help. I just like that option that sometimes people completely forget about it, and then out of nowhere you're like, yeah, Jet Dragon, and then Jet Dragon changes the course of the game, and there's a lot of opportunity to do that with this particular build. Then, pretty standard, I don't think there's any change to the Sage of Visor Blue and the Maiden of White lineup. No matter what variant you are playing, you're always going to want to be maxing out on these, in my complete honest opinion. Then I have gone back to the 1 Master. Now, Master's always an interesting one, especially when you're looking at a Primite variant, when you're looking at an Invoked variant, because what you need to be seeing when you're using a level 4 as your new or main starter, that is going to be what starts your turn. It then means that the additional normal summon that you're able to provide for yourself throughout the mausoleum is going to ideally want to be Sage of Visor Blue, because that can lead you into Maiden, that can lead you into Effect Veiler. That's where you're going to be able to get a bit more advantage. In a scenario where you don't see access to your Invoked engine, and keeping in mind we play 3 Alistar, 3 Meltdown and a Terraforming, so we have 7 direct ways to it, not to mention if you wanted to go through Ancient Fairy Dragon to try and get you access to it because you hard open up an invocation for example, you still have ways to make it work. That being said, I felt that in the grind game, Master actually puts in a lot more work, and again, it's one of these cards that not a lot of people are expecting. Mainly when people are facing the Blue Eyes strategy, even whether it's with or without Primites, they know the targeted cards in the Blue Eyes. You want to get rid of True Light, you want to be able to try and stop Maiden resolving, you want to be able to try and stop your opponent's Sage of Visor Blue resolving, lock them down on the Link 1, hit the Mausoleum. Like, there's so many little pieces that can kind of be picked apart, and I feel that's where something like an Invoked can come into play and really, really help you out. Then again, pretty staple on this one is 3 Wishes of Visor Blue, 1 Roar of the Blue-Eyed Dragons, 1 Mausoleum, True Light, and of course Majesty. I don't think this lineup will ever really change. I don't see much need to be playing 2 Mausoleum. Sometimes it can come up in these very odd scenarios where your opponent banishes this, destroys this, gets rid of this, and you're like, I wish I had a second. But to be honest, you can still play without it once you've gone through it, and it's kind of one of them cards you don't really want to be seeing in your hand. We've seen that many a times, that if you do open up the Mausoleum, it's one form of interruption you can no longer kind of like play through, because you ideally want that additional card in the hand to be either discard fodder, fusion fodder, or just extension fodder. And unfortunately, if you hard open up the Mausoleum, it's a search you can't really gain access to. Then onto the Invoked engine, again, pretty standard on this one. I can't imagine you're going to be changing this anymore. But when you're trying to compare this to the Primites, the way you've got to look at it is your 3 Alistars are your 3 Beryls. So if you're trying to build this on a bit of a cheaper budget, especially with the unfortunate delay of the Battles of Legend, Monsters Mayhem, Beryl is still only going to be accessible for us here in Europe as an ultra rare copy, and Drill Beam is also only available as an ultra rare copy. So they've only had like 1 print each, unless you count the quarter centuries, and then technically 2. But the idea behind that one is Alistair's going to be a lot easier to get hold of right now, a lot cheaper to get hold of, and that is your comparison to Beryl. Off of the back of that, your comparison to Lordy Load, I know it's not direct comparison because Lordy Load just adds so much more, but again, because of the delay in the Monsters Mayhem, unfortunately, you kind of need to have the equivalent, and the equivalent you've got here is your 3 Magical Meltdown, because when you look at what the baseline of a Lordy Load will do for you, it gets you direct access to your Beryl, so you're going to be using your Magical Meltdown to get you access to your Alistar, and you're kind of be trying to look at the comparisons of how you're balancing out the ratios in the deck and then everything else. The next one is where the ratios will slightly change. You could probably consider Terraforming as part of this. You can consider this as the Drill Beam slot. Honestly, I think this is actually quite useful, because if I do see Magical Meltdown and Terraforming, I can then utilize my Blue Eyes Link 1 to be hit with a form of interruption, and that's where terraforming can come into play, because then I go, cool, terraform and search out Mausoleum, and you've been able to drag out like an Imperm, a Veiler, an Ash on your Link 1, as that's still a very, very weak spot for the deck, that if you are locked into dragons, not being able to get to your Mausoleum can really shut off access to Sage or Maiden and ways to get a Blue Eyes onto the field to let you build a little bit further. What is probably considered as the drill beam slot, and right now some people are playing 2 drill beams, so it could be an exact perfect fit, is 2 invocation. We obviously need to be playing 2 of this one. This is your fusion spell. There's been so many times where I go into game 2 or game 3 and I'm like, right, well, I'm going to be going second or I'm going to be going first. I'm going to side out an invocation, because if you see invocation with no Alistair, it's 99.999% dead. Yes, of course, if you wanted to, you could play the Alistair Invoker of Madness in the extra deck just to give you an access to an Alistair on the field, but that's something you might need to look at if you wanted to kind of splice it up and you do see yourself consistently open up Invocation without a route to a Alistair. Remember that extra invocations can also be your easiest discard fodder off of the back of your Wishes of Eyes of Blue, so it kind of gives you a little bit more flexibility should you want to. I feel 2 is the perfect ratio, 3 is too much, 1's a little bit too little, so being able to go with 2 works out. And then there isn't the end of the world if you do decide to side one out. Again, it kind of works as if you were playing 2 Mausoleum. When you side one of them out, you're kind of minimizing the brick, but then increasing the consistency of losing a search or losing an interruption. Even then, back in the day, one of the classic kind of sayings was normal summon Alistair, and then Alistair gets hit with an Ash, Imperm, Veiler, whatever, and then usually the response would be from that opponent that it's just Ash that the Alistair of, you've probably opened up Invocation like all Invoke players do, and then usually it'd be like, yep, activate Invocation. So it's never really that bad of a thing to do. It's just bad if you see Invocation with no Alistair, but if you see Alistair with an Invocation, happy days. Moving on to the hand traps, pretty staple on these ones right now as well. So you've got your 3 Ash Blossoms, you've got your 3 Fluor Losses, and then you've got your 3 Drown Lockbirds. Drown Lockbird is probably like that grey area right now because it's so good in some matchups. It kind of has, I would probably say it has like an 80% effectiveness against the Mitsurugi strategy, and the reason I say only 80% is because if they activate prayers in the draw phase, they just do so much in that position anyway that their first search doesn't really matter once you've drawed it. Malice, it can make plays a little bit awkward. Blue Eyes, it can make plays a little bit awkward, and the Rogue matchups, it can make plays a little bit awkward. So it's one of the ones that, depending on your environment, main decking it is probably well worth it or not at all, and then that's when you can shift this out from the main deck into the side deck, and then you'd play a card that is probably more effective for going first or for your environment, stuff like the Nibiru's. Heck, if you've got all Malices, you'd probably even consider main decking Artifact Lanciers, but then that's kind of something where you consider Ghost Ogres, Ghost Bells, Ghost Mourners, you know it, you've got so many different options. Then for the last of the hand traps, I'm on 2 Bestials, 1 in the Druid Swarm, 1 in the Magnamut. Again, pretty much just to kind of deal with the Makumo, because the Makumo can cause you a lot of issues. Being able to come back and then Raigeki your field can be very, very damaging. There are ways to try and stop it. That's where you've got like Call by the Grave if you wanted to utilize that. You could arguably put in 1 Crossout Designator and Triple Tactic Talents. The benefit of something like those is that they're spell cards, so you're not clogging up your monster zones. But honestly, I quite like the Bestials for the pure fact that Magnamut, if I want it to be a disruptor, search me out the Druid Swarm, and if I want it to be a starter, I can work my way into like routes for other dragons. You could also play the Neo Kaiser, which would be your ideal one to search off the back of the Magnamut. The reason I haven't done this is because of the pure fact that I want my starter to be Alistair the Invoker. Yes, this can still be quite useful for you later on in the turn because this can special summon itself down if you control Blue Eyes White Dragon, but it's something for you to consider. The search of this is secondary. The main priority when I use the Magnamut would be to go into a Druid Swarm, and then that can provide me with another disruption during the end phase of that same turn, or it just adds me an extension so that I could have the Magnamut on the field, Druid Swarm, banish 1 from the graveyard, summon it down, and then work its way into any Link 2, and straight away that Druid Swarm will then send a threat on the field to the grave, and that can also try and pick apart maybe the Makumo from coming back to try and completely Raigeki the field, or you take away the card that could trigger that or to set it up with stuff like Prayers or Purification. The last hand trap is the Effect Veiler, just because it's very easily searchable for the monsters anyway, and then the last actual hand trap will be 3 Infinite Impermanence. As I mentioned before, you have a lot of flexibility on the hand trap lineup. I feel most modern competitive decks, when you see them, will be playing like 12 to 15 hand traps. That's kind of the norm right now. That's kind of what you want to be looking for. You need to be able to disrupt your opponent as much as possible when they are going first. And if you wanted to take this build into a more aggressive route, that's the only one that I would consider main decking and keeping hold of would be your Fluor Loss. And the reason you'd be doing that is it then would make sure that all of your other cards you're taking out, your Imperms, your Ashes, your Drolls, would be field breakers, and that's when you're going to get a bit more of an edge. Moving on to the extra deck, so for the Invoked targets, we're only going to be playing 2 Invoked Macabre. You could consider playing something else along like the Purgatrio. You could consider playing Kaliga, which I think is a really kind of cool option. But I felt the most effective one is the Macabre, and this is kind of like you're one step more for a Drill Beam, because you go access into your Macabre. The one thing you're going to have the least effect of being able to negate would be trap cards, because you only have like your Majesty, your True Light, and your Imperm. And discarding the True Light is not the issue, and to be honest, discarding any other trap cards is not that much of an issue, because you can always recycle them. Like Maiden recycles True Light, and then your Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon will recycle any of your other trap cards, so that's absolutely fine. Spells, you've got quite a few amount that you can actually hold back onto. The kind of issue is with this particular style of deck in comparison to the Primites is the Primites constantly keep recurring themselves. Even though Alistair can straight away recur itself by putting the invocation back into the deck, you can usually with the Primites go, cool, standby phase, add back Beryl, normal summon Beryl, Beryl then gives you the ability to add back the Drill Beam, or the Drill Beam can then reset itself because it's in the graveyard and you control a Primite monster. So that's like a 2-for-1 recycle, and that's the real big crux as to why Primites are so much for, like, when you're trying to compare the competitive nature, you'd probably argue, and this might be a little bit biased, but I would probably say, okay, well, Invoked, if I'm trying to be realistic, is probably a 6 out of 10 on the competitive scale in comparison to Primites, which are probably along the 8 out of 10. If you wanted to say that Primite is the best, you'd probably say the Primites are the 10 out of 10, and then the Invoked are the 8 out of 10. So there's like a 2-point gap between them is what I'm trying to say here. Obviously, you go 8 and then 9 technically being the 1 point, but then 10 being the second one. For the other fusion monsters, 1 Tyrant pretty standard, and the 1 Neo Blue Eyes. For the links, again, pretty standard on this one, 2 Spirits and 1 Hieratic Seals, backed up with the 1 SP Little Knight. For the Synchros, 2 Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon with the 1 Ancient Fairy Life Dragon. So what I like about this particular card and its usages is it allows you to push more aggressive for an OTK, and some players still aren't familiar with this card, whether you are playing Blue Eyes. More times than not, if you're playing Blue Eyes, you're probably well familiar with this card, but those outside of the Blue Eyes circle don't actually know about this card. So when you're going battle phase with a Spirit, they're like, that's a little bit weird. What's going on here? And then you would attack with Spirit, you go tag out the Spirit, you'd go into the Ancient Fairy Life Dragon, and then your opponent goes, okay, that's a new card, let me read it. And there's like, oh, we can attack in defense with 3300. Okay. So it is a very nice aggressive push, which is like why I quite like it, because if you were able to add a Invoke Macabre here to protect you from being Nibiru'd, you then get to go Invoke Macabre, attack, you then go Spirit Dragon, tag, attack, and then tag out into your Ancient Fairy Life Dragon, and then attack for game. On top of that as well, is if you do need that little bit more damage and you'll kind of be a little bit carefree in the battle phase, you can use Invoke Macabre to banish, the Alistair in the hand to discard it, to then increase your Invoke Macabre by 1,000. So then you've got a 35, a 25, and a 33. The other targets to come off the back of the Spirit Dragon is Moonlight Dragon. Being able to return a monster could be very, very useful for you. Lightstorm to deal with spells and traps, and then the Ultimate Spirit Dragon to protect your cards from being banished, which is very important with stuff like Call by the Grave, Bestials, and everything else in between, but then also setting you up with that Omni Negate. I feel that its banish kind of prevention is very much undervalued. I feel a lot of people feel, oh, it's the Omni Negate card that's going to be coming out, or the targeted negate card that's going to be coming out. But what a lot of people forget is if your opponent goes, if you were to, for example, if they went Call by the Grave, and you go, okay, cool, so you went, for example, True Light, summon back Blue Eyes, trigger the effect of Maiden in the graveyard, and they went Call by the Grave, target the Maiden, and you had Spirit on the field, and you went, cool, chain Spirit. As that chain resolves, you would summon out the Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon. Call by the Grave wouldn't be able to banish that Maiden from the graveyard because of the Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon now being on the field and its effect inactive, and so the Maiden then comes back to the field. It's the same in the same scenario with a Bestial. If they were to go True Light and they go Bestial, target the Blue Eyes, you go, okay, cool, Spirit Dragon, tag out, resolve the chain, Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon comes back to the field. The Bestial can now no longer banish your Blue Eyes from the graveyard because of the lingering effect of your Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon, and then Blue Eyes comes back to the field, and then followed by the Maiden. And then the final card is the one that's Superstar Slayer Typhon. You can play pretty much any card in this position, and what I mean by that is if you wanted to go down a Ultimate Zolkin route, the Crimson Dragon route, technically Ultimate Zolkin, or if you wanted to add in the Kaliga, the Purgatrio, you name it, this is the slot that you could free up. But the fact of the matter is, a Typhon being summoned, yes, of course, it will go on top of a Blue Eyes or anything like that, like one of your stronger monsters. But if you have multiple Blue Eyes on the field, you don't mind. And the idea is you're trading that off for a card that says no to Makumo, no to Detonator, and then being able to return one to the hand. Keeping in mind that in a scenario where your opponent has a Detonator and a Makumo, just being able to go normal summon Typhon is not enough, because if you do that, you can only return one and you won't be able to kill the other by battle. So you're not really doing a lot. You're basically shutting off the rest of your plays for your Typhon. And the only additional benefit you'll get from that is if you do have the ability for a Majesty, or if you have the ability for a Drill Beam, if you play that, or if you have the ability to add more to this, that's when you're going to be able to clear off the Makumo or the Detonator during your opponent's turn, because their effects will technically be negated. You just need to make sure you don't be bumping any of your monsters above 3k, or 3k or more, and I don't think you're going to be doing that anyway. So that's pretty much it for the entire main deck and the extra deck. Now to show you the side decks, you have a bit of an idea of what you're going to be looking for. Pretty staple on this one. Phalanxia, not much more needs to be said about this one. And then I've got a range of 2 of, so I've got 2 Nibiru, 2 Meowth, and 2 Perulia. If you don't have access to either of these ones here, so if you don't have access to these are Ghost Spells, Ghost Ogres, Ghost Mourners. They are a 3rd Nibiru. They are possibly putting your Drolls in the side and something else in the main. You could play more Bestials if you have got a lot of Mitsurugis running around. You could look at something along the lines of like an Ultimate Slayer, a Gordian Slicer, less so, or a Metal Tronus if you are constantly facing Mitsurugi Ryziels, but that's when you would adapt this side deck to kind of fit that role. And then for the spells, pretty standard on this one. You kind of want your Spell and Trap hate as well as your opponent's front row, so you got your Lightning Storms and Dusters. And if you're going first, protection options, free Dragon's Mind, like being able to recycle this is very, very important. As long as you control a monster with 2500 original attack or defense, which of course Blue Eyes has 2500 original defense, you get to recycle this. Once you recycle it once, that's pretty much all you need, because the idea would be is you're going to be setting up your field anyway, and your field should be half decent at the base minimum, like Hieratic Seals or a Spirit Dragon, backed up with a Dragon's Mind. You then get to go, okay, cool, activate Dragon Mind, and then negate whatever that's happened. You still got your Spirit Dragon to play, you still got your Hieratic Seals to play, any of the other hand traps you might have opened, any of your other spells and traps, and then as it comes back to your turn, if you're not able to complete the OTK, which 99.999% of the time you should be able to, you can then go, cool, activate the Dragon's Mind, pay that a little bit of life points, reset it, and then you've got this other counter trap that your opponent can't stop the next turn as well. So really cool, really great that it's a common. Hopefully one day we'll get this as a super upgrade, or heck, maybe even a higher upgrade than that. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope this has given you a bit of an idea on a builded update like this. I know it's not a mass update, but I feel that with this update here, I've been able to give you a little bit more information as to why we have made some of these decisions, why we have kind of gone down this route, and kind of worked it from there. For now, as absolutely always, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.